Yesterday, I was saying you have to listen to the press. There's only one guy I trust when it comes to reading the numbers of an election, and that's Henry Olsen. He's dispassionate. He doesn't care who wins or loses. He may care deep down, but he doesn't. The way he reads it is really cool-headed. He's the guy who made me, so I knew the day of the last year's election, I knew that it was going to be much closer between Trump and Hillary Clinton than everybody said it was. Henry Olsen said it was going to be within the margin of error. And so I was, I always follow him because he's just always right and everybody else doesn't get it right. So yesterday, just unbelievable kind of jubilation in our left-wing media about how wonderful it was that all this had happened. And I want to play a montage, first of all, just showing how everybody read this as a rebuke against Donald Trump, because that's what they want so badly. So let's play that montage. That's number one.
Tough election night for President Trump and the GOP. Democrats with key victories in Virginia and New Jersey.
On this first anniversary of President Trump's stunning election victory, it's the Democrats who are celebrating now. Big victories last night in the Virginia and New Jersey races for governor, with exit polls showing voters wanted to send a message to President Trump.
A big win for Democrats and a blow to Republicans, a loss the president will likely take personally.
1/3 of Virginians in a CBS News exit poll said they voted to oppose the president.
Virginia Republicans suffered a good old-fashioned drubbing last night. This was a referendum on guns and health care. Republican Ed Gillespie dipped into the Trump playbook, and it appears to have backfired.
So there's guns and healthcare, all the things they want. This was a referendum on, and it really is amazing that 34% of the people who came out in exit polls, which are notoriously unreliable, they came out and said they came out to vote against Donald Trump. Well, Virginia hates Donald Trump, and one of the reasons they hate Donald Trump is they are the swamp. That's where in Northern Virginia all the people who work in Washington work, and so they really are just absolutely livid at him. And any Democrat who comes out and he said, were you sending a message to Donald Trump, is going to say the same thing. So that 34% number means absolutely nothing. People are voting. You're voting for governor. You're voting for your state. That is why people are voting. But it does mean something, okay? One other clip I've got to play from George Suckalopoulos, the guy, this Clintonista hack who has been somehow theoretically transformed into a journalist, and he's in Good Morning America, and his version, his interpretation of what this election meant, and he's there with Matthew Dowd, another Democrat liberal commentator, and Meghan McCain, who's kind of, I don't know where exactly to put her. She's kind of in the middle, but this is absurd. I just want to play this just so you see the height of the absurdity of the commentary. This is cut 2.
2-1 in Virginia, 3-1 in New Jersey. They wanted to send a message to Trump.
Yeah, they sent a message to Trump big time. But I think the big takeaway that I had from it is the level of diversity and inclusion that happened on election night. If you not only a first transgender person elected to office in Virginia, the first Sikh elected to office in a major city, the first gay mayor of Seattle, the first African-American woman elected mayor of Charlotte, the first woman mayor of Manchester. I mean, it was a night of total diversity, and I think that not only a rejection of Trump, it was basically a rejection of what he stood for.
That's appalling. That is appalling, because you know how Donald Trump is plotting against the Sikhs. I mean, this is the big part of the Trump administration. I remember when he said build a wall to keep out the Sikhs. This narrative that they've got that Trump is somehow a bigot, that he's against diversity of kinds of people, that he's divisive when he is divisive, but he's only as divisive as they are. And this idea that by electing all these different people, they were sending a message to Donald Trump that no, Donald Trump, we're not mean like you, we're welcoming. You're mean, but we're it's just absurd. And this is how the leftist media makes us stupid, because it poses in order to get us to keep since the Democrats are now a coalition of rich white people and minorities, right? Everybody in between is a Republican. So the rich white people and minorities, since the minorities are just being destroyed by their policies. I mean, the cities are terrible and all this stuff. They've got to keep them in there. And so they've got to pose every issue as if it's hurting minorities. So instead of saying, how do we feel about the border? Do we want to enforce the rule of law and enforce our borders and keep people safe? Or do we want to be welcoming and Christian and open? There's a debate. You can have a debate. That's fine. But instead of that, it's, you don't like Mexicans, or you have an open border. And, the same thing with gay marriage, everything. Everything is basically, if you're not it's not their way. It's about hatred, right? If you want to keep the nation safe because Islamic immigration might be a problem, because maybe there's something about Islam that doesn't work in the West. Maybe that too many Islamic people in the West is dangerous for the West, as we see in many parts of Europe and Scandinavia. So you could have that debate. It's dangerous or it's not dangerous. It's dangerous, but freedom of religion trumps the danger. Whatever debate you want to have, but they won't have that debate. They always pose everything as stupidity. So in this stupid way to make you stupid. So what they argue is it's either let everybody in or you hate Islamic people and you're a bigot. So that's the way they're selling this. Anytime Democrats win, it's a triumph for diversity, which of course is nonsense since they don't believe in diversity of thought. So never mind that's the bias, but it's also ill-informed. I mean, it's just reading the numbers badly. Let's go to Henry Olsen, and I have to say this was on the right too. I mean, Karl Rove, and I don't want to pick on Karl Rove. I like the guy, but like Karl Rove got Donald Trump's election utterly wrong. And you remember that night when Mitt Romney lost to Obama. I think it was the second. It was Obama's re-election when he was on Fox News insisting that they were wrong, that their count was wrong because he had the numbers figured out, and he actually stormed down into their counting room and banged on the door and all this stuff, and they fired him. And so Karl Rove, at some point, maybe you start thinking, maybe I don't know how to read numbers. Maybe I should leave this to somebody else. Henry Olsen does know how to read numbers, and he's working at City Journal, one of my favorite magazines. Let's talk about how Henry Olsen reads these numbers, because he's just so good at this. This is City Journal, one of my favorite magazines. Last night's gubernatorial election in Virginia is being touted as a surprise Democrat landslide. It shouldn't be. The results simply reflect the changes that have occurred in national politics since Donald Trump's emergence. That's not great news for Republicans, but neither is it a death knell. Both parties still face the challenges their changing voter coalitions present. Democrat Governor-elect Ralph Northam, this is in Virginia, won largely because Virginia is a highly educated state with a sizable minority population, and both groups have been trending strongly toward Democrats for years, educated people and minorities. Nor should one take the Democratic gains in the Virginia House of Delegates as proof of a Democratic surge, and this is the one everybody was reading as a surge, but I knew it wasn't. But if Henry Olsen says so, I'm just a barefoot teller of tales, but if Henry Olsen says so, it's true. The surprise is not that Republicans lost most of the seats, but it was the surprise that they had held the vast majority of them for so long because the state is going blue. Still, these losses are discouraging for Republicans because seats like these are the basis for much of their congressional and state legislative majorities. Any Republican running for a Clinton-carried House seat is now on notice that he or she will have a hard time winning unless the political climate dramatically shifts. So there's a lot of those Clinton-held House seats. In other words, House seats that Republicans now hold in districts where Clinton won. There's about 23 of them, I think, and if the Democrats win 24, they'll take the House. And so that's an important point, and that's an important thing for Republicans to be thinking about. On the other side, however, and as Democrats learned to their dismay last year, America is not solely composed of well-educated, affluent suburbs. The untold story, at least in the mainstream media from last night, is how well the Trump coalition held up under fire. See, this is the important point. Trump's people are not deserting him. Trump's people love Trump, and they're sticking with him, so he's got his base, and depending on what happens now, he can add to that base or possibly destroy it. But Olsen goes on, Republicans who voted for Trump in 2016 largely came out and voted straight Republican tickets yesterday. There are Republicans challenging Democratic incumbent senators in Montana, North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, and Ohio next fall. If last night's Virginia results were projected onto these seats, in other words, if the same kind of turnout happened in all those states, Republicans would have an excellent chance of picking up all 5 Senate seats. I mean, that is really impressive stuff. So I think that what the Republicans are looking at as they're looking at a changing coalition and a changing series of ideas, they're looking at people, working class people who still are committed to the welfare state. So they're not as interested in what Paul Ryan is doing with reforming entitlements, which I love. They're not as interested in that. They're much more interested in Donald Trump. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you. But we're going to do it in a more conservative way. And the thing is, the other thing that's been going around is this idea that Donald Trump is just a kind of wild card flying here and there. And that's because of the way he talks. And that's because of his tweets and all these things that he's doing that make him seem like a crazy man. Tom Friedman from Knucklehead Row, the guy, he's in the New York Times op-ed page, Knucklehead Row. Tom Friedman talks about how these tweets make everybody so crazy that they don't pay attention to what's actually happening. And he says it like it's a bad thing, but for us, it's not so bad. Here's Friedman discussing this.
I find it, from a journalism point of view, Donald Trump is a brain-eating disease. That is, he does so many outrageous things on a daily basis. You talked about Sam Cleese, this guy appointing to head the Agriculture Department, $3 billion research budget, an Iowa talk show host, shows such contempt for science and the department. And as a journalist or columnist, you sit there and say, how could I not write about that? That's so outrageous. And yet if I write about it every week, I end up not going out and learning or writing about all these other things. And I think it's a real danger that Trump is going to suck the brains out of so many reporters and columnists, because you spend 4 years outraged at him and then you don't learn anything. And he's done so many outrageous things, you can't even keep track of them anymore.
Trump is a brain-eating disease, meaning his brain has been eaten. I could have told them that. That was true before Trump came along. But what they're saying is they're being distracted from what is really happening. And I think that's not only true on the left, I think it's true on the right as well, where there's still these people who have a class objection to Donald Trump at some level. He's just not quite the thing. And the people on the right who really are exulting in any loss that Trump faces and trying to say that he's destroying the party and all this. He's not destroying the party. The party is changing, and he has manifested that.